It's no secret that our society has a fascination with serial killers. We pore over every last detail of their heinous crimes, soak up the stories of their captures and convictions, even rejoice when they meet their end. We just can't get enough of serial killers, even going so far as to wonder about things like, what did famous serial killers eat for their last meal? From the grossly gluttonous to the downright bizarre, the final meals of some of the world's most infamous killers is sure to surprise you. Delbert Teague Jr. On a quiet April night in 1985, Donna Irwin and her boyfriend Tommy Cox were enjoying a private romantic evening at a scenic lookout near Fort Worth, Texas, when their lives were turned upside down. Delbert Teague Jr. and an accomplice cornered the unsuspecting couple, tied Tommy up and robbed him of $80 before they forced Donna into their vehicle and took off. Moments later, another truck arrived and Tommy, who had gotten free of his bonds, approached it begging for help. Suddenly, Teague and his accomplice returned to the scene and opened fire on the occupants, who had simply been at the wrong place at the wrong time. All three men were shot with a .22 pistol, and Kevin Allen was killed. Teague once again fled the scene with Donna in tow, and over the next several days proceeded to drive hundreds of miles, crossing state lines with his captive, while repeatedly sexually assaulting her. After Donna left a hastily scrawled note behind in a rest stop bathroom, the police tracked down Teague, and after a dramatic 100-mile-per-hour chase, they finally captured him and freed Donna. This wasn't Teague's only brush with the law. He had previously been convicted of robbery, forgery, and weapons charges, and had even served 2 years for involuntary manslaughter. At his trial, prosecutors called him a one-man slaughterhouse before he was convicted and sentenced to death. Teague initially refused to order a special meal, but his grieving mother requested that he be given a cheeseburger, which he begrudgingly ate to please her before going to his death. Turns out even hardened criminals are no match for their moms. If only the next killer had such a strong-willed parental figure, he might have had a better last meal. David Edwin Mason. Over a chaotic 9-month period in 1980, David Edwin Mason beat and strangled to death 4 defenseless elderly victims in their own homes before robbing them. It's likely that Mason knew many of his victims personally, having previously been hired by them to do odd jobs around their homes. At the time of his arrest, Mason was also wanted for shooting his male lover to death as he slept. And his violent spree didn't stop after he was apprehended. While in jail awaiting trial, he and another inmate beat Mason's cellmate and strangled him to death with a garrote made of a knotted towel, before hanging the battered body in a shower in a feeble attempt to make it look like a suicide. Mason also had a violent past. He had previously been convicted of robbery, assault, and weapons charges, and had even shown violent tendencies as a child, assaulting other school kids, threatening his brother with a knife, setting fires, and self-harming. His parents responded with harsh discipline, bordering on abuse, but surprisingly, it didn't seem to help. After his conviction, Mason waived all of his appeals and requested a quick execution, which he was granted, and he was gassed to death at San Quentin in 1993. He refused a last meal, instead asking for just a glass of ice water before he faced the gas chamber. Mason may have gone to his death with nothing but ice water in his stomach, but this next murderer must have had ice in her veins. Carla Faye Tucker. After a wild night of partying, Carla Faye Tucker had an idea. She decided it was the perfect time to head to the apartment of one Jerry Dean to collect some money that he owed her and to intimidate him a little. Tucker would end up doing much more than intimidating him. After breaking in with a stolen key, Tucker approached Dean as he slept in his bed and put a pickaxe to his head. As he awoke and began to beg for his life, Tucker struck him in the head with the axe. A witness would later testify that he saw Tucker pull the axe out of a body and smile maniacally to herself before hitting it again with enthusiasm. In all, Tucker would strike Dean 28 times with the pickaxe, and she would later tell investigators that each blow gave her a thrill of sexual satisfaction. Tucker also killed Deborah Thornton, who was in bed with Dean, and she was captured by the police a few days later, convicted and sentenced to death. In prison, Tucker gained national attention for her outgoing personality and her conversion to born-again Christianity. Popular televangelist Pat Robertson even campaigned unsuccessfully for her sentence to be commuted to life in prison. Before Tucker made history as the first woman to be executed in Texas since 1863, and the second woman executed in the entire U.S. since the 1976 reinstatement of the death penalty, she feasted on a final meal of fresh salad, a ripe peach, and a single banana. It's nice to know that there are vegetarian-friendly options on death row. But you won't believe what our next killer requested off the plant-based menu. In the summer of 1960, drifter Victor Fager was staying at a decrepit boarding house when he called Dr. Edward Bartles, claiming that a woman there desperately needed medical help. When Dr. Bartles arrived, Fager kidnapped him and later killed him with a gunshot to the head. Authorities believe that Fager was after the doctor's drugs and that he had picked Dr. Bartels at random out of the Yellow Page listings. He was the last person to be executed in Iowa and the last person executed in the entire U.S. for the next 40 years. The night before he was set to die by hanging, Fager held an all-night vigil with a Catholic priest, and for his last meal he requested a single olive with the pit left in. He believed the pit would grow into an olive tree inside of his dead body and be a symbol of peace. If Fager's idea of a peaceful last meal doesn't exactly appeal to you, then our next criminal's final indulgence might be a little more up your alley. Timothy McVeigh. On the morning of April 9, 1995, just moments after parents had finished dropping off their children at the Murrah Federal Building's on-site daycare, downtown Oklahoma City was rocked by a giant explosion. A rental truck stuffed with explosives had been parked outside of the building, and the blast destroyed half of the 9-story building, injuring 450 people, killing 168, including 19 small children. Army vet Timothy McVeigh was captured by police just hours later and convicted of the horrific crime. The bombing took place on the second anniversary of the fire at David Korsh's Waco compound, and McVeigh's rage toward the government for that event, plus the earlier siege on Randy Weaver, had stoked McVeigh's hatred toward the government and prompted him to commit the worst domestic terrorist attack in American history. He remained unrepentant until the very end, claiming that the U.S. government were the true terrorists and stating that even before his execution, the score would still be 168-1, leaving him victorious. Before McVeigh became the first person to be executed in the U.S. in the 40 years since Fager's execution, he gorged himself on 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. If ice cream is the last meal of choice for the man who killed hundreds, what would the person who killed millions want for their final meal? You might be surprised. Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann, one of the key architects of the Nazis' final solution, was one of the most notorious war criminals in history. After the end of World War II, Eichmann managed to evade capture and escape to Argentina, a country known for its hesitancy to deport war criminals, where he settled down with his family and lived comfortably for decades. That is, until a group of Israeli operatives daringly kidnapped Eichmann outside of his home and spirited him to Israel to account for his crimes. His April 1961 trial, featuring harrowing testimonies from Holocaust survivors, was widely publicized and was a major force in bringing the true scale of the Nazis' atrocities to light for the general public. Eichmann claimed to have been nothing but a cog in the Nazi machine, but the evidence showed that he had been responsible for the Nazis' mass deportation of Jews to ghettos and killing centers, having designed the entire system down to the last details himself, and personally profiting from the confiscation of Jewish assets. Eichmann was found personally responsible for the deaths of millions of European Jews, and before he was executed by hanging on June 1, 1962, more than 2 decades after the end of the war, he requested a final bottle of red wine as his last meal. Alcohol might be the obvious choice for the last meal, but what would a killer with less refined tastes want? You're about to find out. John Wayne Gacy. By all appearances, John Wayne Gacy was a model citizen, beloved by his community for his volunteer work, and known for dressing up as a clown to entertain local children. But Gacy, who would come to be known as the Killer Clown, had a dark side. In 1978, a young man disappeared after meeting with Gacy about a construction job, prompting authorities to search Gacy's unassuming suburban home. What they uncovered was a real-life house of horrors. Beneath the floorboards were the lime-covered bodies of 29 of Gacy's victims, and he would later admit to having thrown the bodies of 4 more victims into a nearby river. Gacy was convicted of the brutal murder of 33 young men and boys, and in 1980 he was sentenced to death. For his last meal, the one-time manager of a KFC restaurant that was owned by his former father-in-law requested a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken original recipe, a side of fries, and a pound of fresh strawberries. Apparently, the guards never did confirm to Gacy that the chicken actually came from KFC, so at least he went to the grave with that nagging question unanswered. Gacy's greasy last meal seems fitting for such a disgusting monster, but it has to make you wonder, what would the world's most charming serial killer want for his final feast? Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a handsome, charming law student, but he was also living a horrifying double life. The seemingly clean-cut Bundy had been raping and murdering women all over the U.S. for years, first charming them into his vehicle before brutally raping and murdering them and then callously disposing of their bodies. Bundy also managed to charm his way out of more than a few close calls before he was finally caught. He was first arrested and charged with aggravated kidnapping when the police found handcuffs in his car, but the clever killer would escape from custody not once, but twice. After his second escape, he fled to Florida, where he managed to evade capture for weeks. While on the run, he viciously attacked 5 college students, brutally beating them with a blunt instrument and strangling and killing 2 of them. 2 weeks later, he assaulted and murdered a 12-year-old girl. He was finally recaptured when he was caught by by police in a stolen car and convicted of murdering the 3 Florida women, though he would later go on to confess to having raped and killed more than 30 women in Colorado, Oregon, Utah, Florida, and Washington. Before he was sent to face his death, Bundy refused to make a special request for his last meal, so he was given the standard final meal at a Florida state prison: a medium-rare steak, eggs over easy, toast with butter and jelly, milk, coffee, juice, and hash browns. He didn't need a single bite. From ice water to olive pits, fried food to 4-course meals, learning what famous serial killers ate as their last meal is morbidly fascinating, to say the least. So now that you know what the likes of Adolf Eichmann and Ted Bundy chose for their final meal before facing their deaths, we have to ask you, what would you eat for your last meal? If this video successfully stoked your serial killer curiosity, you'll definitely want to check out our other videos like this one, called America's Worst Serial Killer, the Casanova Killer. Or perhaps you'll like this other video instead. And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.